Welcome to Love and Abuse, the show about helping you identify poisonous communication and toxic behavior. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. That's why it's important that you learn to pinpoint manipulative and controlling behavior so that you keep your power and your sanity. I'm your host, Paul Coliani. Welcome to another episode of Love and Abuse. As a reminder, all information on this show is meant for educational purposes only, and always seek a professional for your mental health and well-being. And I'm going to read you a message that I received for my other podcast, The Overwhelmed Brain. I think the question is more appropriate for this show, and it's going to be very helpful for you listening if you're in any type of relationship that you would consider difficult. And I don't call all difficult relationships emotionally abusive or controlling or manipulative. I just call emotionally abusive relationships difficult. So if you're in a difficult relationship, it doesn't mean there's control, manipulation, or emotional abuse going on. It could just mean somebody's stuff is up. Somebody gets triggered. Now, there is often emotionally abusive behavior that comes with a difficult relationship. But it's good to know that maybe the relationship's going through a phase or some sort of trigger that somebody can't let go of. Like when I was married, when I met the person who would be my wife, I was triggered in the first week and I held on to that same trigger the 8 years we were together. I held on to the same trigger, and all of my responses, all of my behavior stemmed from that trigger. So I was never really happy, and neither was she. I was never really myself. And how could she be herself if I was always judgmental and emotionally abusive toward her? Sometimes we can figure out what these triggers are, talk about them, get through them, work them out, and maybe the relationship can survive. But what often happens is that one or both people are triggered throughout the relationship, and they are responding from that trigger. All of their behavior derives from that trigger. And because of that, the relationship becomes difficult because we're on almost fight or flight mode all the time. We're trying to survive. We're trying to get through the moment, and we're trying to have our needs met. And in order to do that, we have to sometimes become hurtful, and not intentionally sometimes, but hurtful and controlling and manipulative. And this is what happens is when we are in any type of relationship where we are triggered by something the other person does or a part of who they are even, then we do behavior that might not be healthy. It could be considered toxic. And then we think it's their fault. I mean, this can happen too. One person can think it's the other person's fault for not changing, when it often turns out to be something that the person with the trigger is going through that needs to get through and heal and learn to either accept or move away from that person, get away from the relationship. And there's all kinds of stuff we talk about on the show, as you know, if you've been listening a while, that is important to understand about both people. Often, almost always, I would say, bad behavior comes from being triggered by something. And a trigger could be something as, I don't know, like my childhood, I grew up in an alcoholic home. And for the longest time, I had a problem with people drinking around me. And so when my girlfriend would get a drink, I would be bothered by it, and I would judge her, and I would say things, and I would give her that look. And it was awful. I'm sure she didn't feel very good about herself for having something as innocent as an alcoholic drink. But my trigger was up. It was happening. It was activated. So I didn't behave normally. I behaved in a toxic way. So when you hear me say the word trigger, I like to look at it as an emotional trigger because it creates some sort of emotional response in us. And we want to get our needs met. We want to feel safe. We want to feel secure. And we can't feel secure when somebody is doing something that is giving us a little bit of PTSD. I mean, that's pretty much how you can look at it. A trigger is the onset of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. I was traumatized by an alcoholic's behavior when I was younger. I brought that into my adult relationship, and now I'm re-traumatized by watching the person that I am with, the one that I want to trust fully and completely and want to let my guard down with, do the same behavior that someone in my past did that made me feel unsafe. That's the simplified version of PTSD. And it ruins relationships. Our emotional triggers can ruin relationships, unfortunately. And some people take their triggers to the extreme because they end up hurting the other person. Just like my triggers caused me to give when I was married, my wife the silent treatment, caused me to look at her in bad ways, caused me to give her that look when she was doing something that triggered me. And so all these triggers came up in me because I hadn't healed myself. And this is what it comes down to, is that we often get triggered by something that, or I should say always, we always get triggered by something when we haven't healed from it. And so if you are finding yourself being triggered by someone else's behaviors or their comments or what they look like, what they do, whatever it is, that's something in you that hasn't been healed yet. And I say that not because every trigger is something wrong with you or some sort of trauma. I say that only to those people that stay with someone that triggers them and continue to complain about what they are triggered by. For example, if you had a childhood like mine and you were triggered by someone drinking alcohol, but they don't drink to excess, they do it for recreation, they do it to enjoy themselves, they're not a complete jerk or whatever when they're drunk, if they even get drunk, but it triggers you. When they pick up an alcoholic drink, it triggers you. If you stay in a relationship with someone that continues to trigger you, you can either A, talk about it and say, hey, look, when you pick up a drink, it triggers me. I'd like to talk about this and see where that conversation goes. Or B, you can want them to stop. And if they don't, you can continue being upset with them, being angry with them, giving them the silent treatment, giving them that look, making them feel bad for drinking, hoping that they feel guilty enough that you feel bad that they'll stop drinking. You can do that as well. You can do C, which is repress all the upset or anger that you have and never bring it up and just let it fester down inside of you so it comes out in other behaviors that make the other person question what the heck's wrong with you, because that's what happens too. It's like, why are you exploding? I can't believe you're just like blowing up, because you're not telling them exactly why you're triggered. So you hold it in, you stuff it down, and then it comes out in other destructive ways. And there's two more. D is when you decide to accept their behavior and learn to work on yourself, learn to heal what needs healing in you. You know, you bring the focus from them back onto you, realizing it's your lack of acceptance of their behavior and not their behavior itself that really is the problem. And then there's E. E is when you decide, you know what, I can't be around you because you're triggering me, because I can't handle that behavior. I can't handle what you're doing, so I need to be away from you. That may mean leaving or separating for a while or whatever it takes, because you can't handle that because you're triggered. But you don't blame them for feeling triggered. You look at yourself, and I'm not saying you blame yourself. You look at yourself. You take responsibility that you're triggered by something they're doing. And then you take responsibility for the next step. And E might be you just have to step away. You have to get away from them because you can't handle it. And I'm not saying there are things in this world that won't require E. If you have a romantic partner that's cheating on you, of course that's going to be triggering, and maybe you should consider E. Leaving, getting away, because then that keeps you safe, because there are certain behaviors that are violations of our values. And when someone else's behavior is a violation of our values, that's when we do have to focus on ourselves and taking the next right step for us. If it's not necessarily a violation of our values, but we just don't want it in our lives, then, the other options might be available as well. Just like I may not want my girlfriend to smoke. And if she said, I really want to smoke, that might be a huge thing for me because it's not necessarily a values violation, but it triggers me in a way that I think, well, I'm not going to have as much quality time with her. She's going to smell like smoke. And I'm going to have all these thoughts about it, and I'm not going to be happy about it. And I'm going to go even further and say, well, she could get lung cancer. I'm going to have all these thoughts, and I'm going to be triggered because I don't want that in my relationship. Yet if she told me, look, I only want like one cigarette at a party every few months, I might think about this harder and think, if it's one cigarette at a party every now and then, I guess that's not bad. I mean, I don't think she'd ever do this, but I'm trying to put myself in this position. If something that she did triggered me, but it was once in a while, then is the problem really with her doing what I don't want her to do? Or is it with me and my lack of acceptance for someone wanting to be themselves and do what they want as an individual, as someone that is not tied to a parent that's trying to control them or some sort of authoritarian person that wants to control them? Do I want to be that person? Probably not. So there are things to consider, but that's what I'm trying to say is that sometimes it's a values violation. Sometimes it's just a trigger, and you just have to weigh each option to figure out what is the best one for you. I can tell you this, the option to repress and avoid talking about it and just stuff down those negative emotions, probably one of the worst options you can choose. Not a good option. That is definitely unhealthy for the relationship and for you. So anyway, I started off this show wanting to read this email. I'm going to read this really quick. It's not long. And I'm going to answer it for this person, which I'll call Bob. Bob says, I've been listening to their podcast for a bit and I love it. One of the things I love about the podcast is that I really identify with your story. I too brought difficult problems from my childhood into my marriage, which I then projected onto my lovely wife. When I first heard you say the words emotional abuse about your behavior, I just about choked. I have emotionally abused my wife. I have a great deal of regret around that, and I'm on a solid path to healing. I love hearing you speak about the possibility of healing. I'm taking the steps it takes to effect real change. My question is this: have you ever encountered a story or situation like this where the couple involved stays together? My wife and I aren't divorced, but we're having trouble seeing a way forward. The abuse has ended, but the wounds are raw. I don't want to speak for her, but I know I have hurt her to the deepest core, and I don't know whether we can ever get back to a place of having a healthy romantic relationship. Thanks for your time and keep up the good work. All right, Bob, thank you for that question. And it's a very valid, very significant question because you're thinking, okay, I'm working on this relationship. What am I doing it for? Are we going to heal through this? Are we going to get through it and be where we were? Or maybe you're not thinking that. Maybe you just want to know, like you asked, is it going to be a healthy romantic relationship? So here's my immediate thought on this. Well, let me answer your first question first. The first question you had was, have I encountered any story or situation like this where the couple involved stays together? Not necessarily. It depends on how worn out the victim of the emotional abuse is. If they are just completely worn out, completely disconnected from the other person, it doesn't tend to go in the direction that leads to a romantic relationship again. It can, and I'm going to talk about that in a moment, but it doesn't normally do it. I've personally not seen too much of it. I have seen it, but it requires a lot of work on both sides, but especially by the person who did the bad behavior. But the other person who was the victim of that bad behavior also has to go through a lot of healing and the rebuilding of trust. And that rebuilding can take a long time. And this is the second part of my answer here, is that when someone has been through the ringer with emotional abuse or control or manipulation or all of the above, when they've been through it, it's very, very difficult to reconnect and open your heart again. It's like the closed heart tends to stay closed with the person who closed it, or at least facilitated closing it. And so your wife may have reached that point, like when I was married, my wife did, where the love is gone. And it sounds horrible when I'm saying this. It sounds like bad news, but stay with me a moment. I'm going to see if I can work in some good news here too. But the bad news is once the heart is closed, it's very hard to come back because you're the person who helped close it. And it's very hard for her to come back to that because at one point she trusted you probably 100%. And that trust started deteriorating through the emotionally abusive behavior that you did. And as it deteriorated, her heart closed more and more and more until she locked it. And she may be at that point. It almost sounds like she is. She locked it. She locked it shut to protect herself from you. And that may feel bad. I get it. I feel the same way. When I realized my own bad behavior toward my wife, I felt awful. This is when I started healing, started getting through it and realized, oh, why would anyone want to stay with me? I can't believe I put her through that. That's when you put yourself in their shoes and you realize, oh, I wouldn't want to be treated that way. Because as soon as the thought comes to mind that this person could choose to be with anyone in the world, and she chose to be with you, it's such an honor and a privilege, and you've taken advantage of it. And I'm not trying to put you down for that. I'm trying to talk to anyone listening that might be taking advantage of a relationship or of someone that could spend their time with anyone else, and they choose to spend it with you. And what do you do with that time? How do you treat that person? And so that's how I look at relationships now is this could be our final day. This could be our final hour together. How am I going to treat you? And am I going to feel good about treating you that way? If we get into a fight and then you take off in a car and you never come back for whatever reason, you crash and you get hurt, or you die, or you move away because I said something awful, how am I going to feel at that point? So it's a constant process of continually making sure that you're doing the best you can and treating the person that could be with anyone else in the world, treating them as kindly and with respect and showing them how special they are in your life. I like to look at relationships like that. You're treating the other person so special because you can't believe they chose you. I think that's a humbling place to be. I can't believe my girlfriend chose me. I'm going to treat her like gold. This is amazing. I am so lucky. When you have something like that in your life, I think you should treat it special. Problem is, so many people don't. And like you're talking about, Bob, you definitely didn't treat her special. You treated her in abusive ways, just like I did with my relationships in the past. All of them. I mean, all of my past relationships except for this one. Fortunately, for the past 6-7 years, I've been with this same person after I did a lot of healing. And that's what it took. It took me losing relationships to do a lot of healing. And I hope you don't lose yours, Bob. So let me tell you what you might need to work on and what to expect. First, let's talk about what to expect. Expect her not to love you for a little while. I want you to just kind of accept this, that she doesn't, well, let me put it this way. She's not in love with you at this moment. She may love you. I don't know, but she's probably not in love with you because in love requires an unlocked heart. In love requires trust. In love requires feeling safe and feeling good with the person that you're with. She may not be in that space and she may not be there for a while. So what you need to do is not see this person as someone who should be in love with you. You need to see this person as someone who cares about you because she's still there. So this is my guess. She still cares about you. She still knows you're a great guy because she's still there. Again, my guess, my assumption. But let's just say that she's not in love with you. I want you to be okay with that. I know it's hard to accept maybe, but I want you to be okay that this person's not in love with you. And the reason I say that is because if you can become okay with that, then you won't be looking for it. You won't be trying to draw it out of her. You won't be trying to pull something out of her that she's not ready to let go and may feel like she will never be ready to let go. And support that. If you can become supportive of that in her, then you're going to go a long way in the healing process for both of you. Because then there'll be no expectations in the relationship. So the in love part, if you can accept that she's not there, you may be, but she's not there, and accept it and be okay with it, then you can reach a new state of mind with it. You can reach a new comfort with it, even though it may not be comfortable. You'll be in a place that you'll accept her for where she is and who she is and what she's going through and everything else that she needs to experience. Because that's what's really happening here. You need to accept her experience and support it. And I mean, you really need to be the person that says, you're absolutely right. You need to be where you are. I would be like that if I were you as well. I mean, you can even say something like that if you want. I would be where you are now if I went through what I put you through. Because this is going to show empathy, and hopefully you feel empathy. And I think you do, because you have regret. You feel bad for how you treated her. You need to hang on to that regret for a little while, and you need to hang on to some of that pain that you caused her and the pain you feel for doing it, not to make yourself feel bad and stay in a mode of guilt, but just as a reminder for now, but not necessarily as a primary driver of your behavior. And what I mean by that is the pain and the regret are reminders that you are continually working on yourself, continually on a healing path, and that you could fall off the wagon. Because I do. I mean, it's been many, many years since I've displayed most of the bad behavior that I used to do in my relationships. It's been many years. But every now and then, some thought will pop up or some little trigger will happen, and I feel it coming on. I can have the thoughts I used to have, and suddenly I'm in, scramble mode. I'm scrambling inside my head thinking, oh, what's happening here? What's going on? Why am I triggered? I got to figure this out. We have these old neuroassociations that happen in our brain that say, hey, when this happens, you get triggered. We haven't healed from that yet. We need to work on that. This is why you have to have a reminder of perhaps the regret and the pain and the hurt that someone's feeling, just to let you know how important it is to work on yourself. And you may already be doing that, and that's great. If you're not, it's not a bad thing to have sort of in the background. Not, like I said, a primary driver, a primary thought, just something back there to remind you, hey, you're continuing to heal and you could fall off the wagon. So just stay aware, stay present. And when you feel it coming on, go back in yourself and work on that. Don't direct it at her. As soon as you direct it at her, what's going to happen is any amount of trust that she has started to rebuild will be dismantled. It will dissolve. It will take all that work you did and throw it out the window. So this is something vital. And this is the next part of my answer here, which is as long as you're both willing to see what happens with the relationship and you want to stay together, I would not treat this as trying to get back to the way you were, because the way you were was toxic. The way it was probably never healthy. Even in the beginning, it might have been great, but there were certain behaviors and characteristics that probably were showing themselves, at least to you could probably think about, and maybe to her too, but that weren't healthy. So never see it as getting back to the way you were. Because there was a time, yes, when you were happy, but that time also contained toxic elements. So don't do that. Instead, see this as a brand new relationship, because it has to be, because you don't want to go back to the old behavior. So it's brand new. And because of that, if you met someone for the first time, you're going to have lower expectations of them wanting to fall in love with you, open their heart to you, trust you completely. And by having no expectations and working on this slowly and treating each other as if you were new people, you're rediscovering who you are, especially her. She's rediscovering who you are because she doesn't know this new you. and it's going to take her a long time to get to know this new you. It could take a year. It could take more. If you really care about each other, though, and if you really want to see this work, you got to take out any desperate need to draw any type of love from her. That has to come from her on her own time, if it ever even happens. But you have to respect her place and support where she is. So I highly recommend you support what she's going through, every thought that she has, even if she says, I don't think it's going to work out. If she says that, you have to be in a supportive enough place to be able to say, I totally understand. That's it. I totally understand. And of course it's going to hurt you. Of course it may feel even devastating. But you have to look at it as her way of trying to figure out if you're going to revert. I'm not saying she's trying to test you specifically here, but if you can respond to something that you know will be devastating in a way that still makes her feel safe, authentically, your genuine, authentic response still makes her feel safe, that trust is going to build little by little. And so this is what I mean when she says something that sounds completely devastating to you. If you go into a type of negative reaction, if you have some sort of trigger and your old behavior comes out, A, you're going to need to work on that because you need to heal from that. And B, any progress that you two have made will be out the window. Because at this point, you are in a space where all of your behavior is under a magnifying glass. I hate to put you on that eggshell mode, but it's not a bad thing because you need to watch your behavior under a magnifying glass too. And constantly be asking yourself, am I doing this behavior to control her, or am I doing it because I need to do it for me? And if there's any thought of wanting to control her or make her do something that you want her to do, then you might be going back to old ways, and you need to notice that in yourself. And that's going to help if you actually bring that up and talk about that with her. Meaning, you might feel something come on and you might say something to her, and then you ask yourself, wait, am I saying this to try to control her? And you might actually verbalize that to her. I just realized I said that because I want to control you. That's not good. That's very unhealthy behavior. I'm sorry I said that. I need to work on myself on that. I need to work on healing from that. I realize what I did. I am so sorry. And then you go within. And don't wait for her to go, I accept your apology. Don't wait for her to do anything. Just know you did it. Know you said something or did something that made you want to control her or make her feel guilty or make her feel bad about herself. Anything that you might have done that changes her in some way instead of looking inward. When you find out that you're trying to change her or cause her to do something or feel a certain way or think a certain way, you may want to verbalize, oh, I see what I just did. I am so sorry. That's exactly something I'm trying to work on myself. Let me go meditate on that. Let me go think about that. Let me go heal on that. I'm so sorry. And then just, walk away. And if she says, no, let's talk about that. Great. Now you have a conversation. Now she's willing to talk about it, bring it up out into the open. But I do believe it's important to continue being transparent about what you're going through with her. Because you don't know if this relationship's going to work out. So really you have nothing to lose and everything to gain by being transparent, by constantly working on your own healing, by having no expectations from her at all. Don't expect her to suddenly cuddle up to you on the couch when you're watching a movie. Just accept that her heart is closed. That's where she feels the most comfortable right now, and it may or may not ever open. And can you love her enough to support her in that, even if it's forever? That's the hard part, because if you can really embrace that and embody that, what you're going to do is make it the safest environment for her that she could ever ask for. I think the most important part is you support someone where they are, where they feel the safest, where they feel the happiest. And when you do that, you give them an environment to thrive with or without you. And it's okay either way. You may be hurt. Absolutely. You may feel devastated. And I'm sure she's going to be hurt too, because this was something that she dreamed about or wanted to work out. So it's not just you being hurt, I know that, but it's important that she is in a space inside of her that she feels absolutely okay to be herself, even if it's not being intimate with you. And be okay with that. In fact, you might even want to, and this is maybe crazy, but you might even want to say, hey, look, I'm going to give you the bed. I'm going to sleep in another room. I don't know if that's possible in your house, but it's not because you're trying to separate. It's because you want her to feel good and safe and healthy and happy. And no matter what, you're willing to do whatever it takes. If you can achieve that with her, then you are going to create an environment for both of you to heal and grow and thrive through this, not necessarily with the intent of getting back together. Because as soon as we throw that intent in there, then sometimes behavior changes. But with the intent, you're creating the best opportunity for both of you as individuals to grow into a healthier space inside you. So that if you get back together in the future, if and when, hopefully, if that's how it works out, that you bring the best version of yourselves together. And now you can work on something brand new and that old stuff is behind you. So I gave you a lot to chew on in this episode, and I hope anyone that might be listening is getting some value from this as well. Thank you, Bob, for writing this. Thank you for your words about the show. And I'm glad that you are one of those that is healing. I'm glad that you realized what you did. You did something, and now you got to make up for it, and you got to fix it. And you can't necessarily fix her. You can only fix yourself. You can only heal yourself and bring this best version of you into the world and into this relationship, no matter what it turns into. No matter what, you're learning a lot, and you're going to heal from a lot. And your relationship, whether it's this one or any future one, is going to be so different. My girlfriend just said last week, we had a bunch of friends over, and she said, his last relationship, his marriage, he was judgmental all the time. I mean, these are only the stories that I told her, but she's reciting these stories as if she was there. He was so judgmental all the time, but he's never judgmental toward me. When she said that, my heart just filled with warmth. I just couldn't believe she said that, because I can even recall times at the beginning of this relationship where I went a little too far and I felt inside that I was being judgmental and I had to pull back. But for her to say that, that just tells me that I have gone through a lot. I have healed from a lot, and that the person I'm with actually sees it. I mean, the person you're with is always going to see more than you see about yourself. So for her to say that, that just felt so good. And it reminded me of how far I've come. And I hope it reminds you, Bob, every time you think about your past, as each day goes on, who you were is so different than who you are today. And keep going along that path. Keep going on that road. Never go back to being emotionally abusive. Never do that old behavior. And always remember that whenever that behavior comes up, something needs to heal or release inside of you. Thanks again, Bob. Share this with others that might benefit. Love and Abuse is the official podcast of the Mean Workbook, an assessment and healing guide for difficult relationships. It contains a 200-point checklist to help you not only pinpoint the exact behaviors causing difficulties in your relationship, but will also clearly reveal to you why you leave so many interactions feeling bad. I like to look at the workbook as something that's perfect if you need proof that you're not losing your mind, or just need conclusive information to help you make the next best relationship decisions for both of you. Remember, not all emotionally abusive relationships have to end. Some can heal and grow from the challenges, and some can't. It takes both people willing to be honest and work on themselves, knowing that they both play a role in what might be happening. Now, if you're the only one working on the relationship, then you probably already feel alone. But know that this show exists to remind you you're not alone, and you're not going crazy. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. You deserve honesty and sincerity. You deserve to be treated as worthy and significant, because you are. Thank you for joining me today. We'll talk again soon.